Welcome to Daraz Special. I'm your host Nischhal Pradhan. I'm going to be here for half an hour with special guests from Dharaz, Mr. Lino Ahlering, MD of Dharaz, and Mr. Pyakurel, CC of Dharaz. Both of them are here to talk about Dharaz's approach to help Nepal to cope up with the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's going to boost the economy. So let's start with Mr. Ahlering. So what is e-commerce and how has it grown over the years in global scale?
So e-commerce is pretty much the selling and buying through the internet, and it's pretty much an existing concept since since the 90s. It really started evolving in the United States and in China predominantly, with most of the household names that you probably also know, Amazon in the US and then Alibaba, the equivalent in China. So that's kind of how it started, and I think these were probably the two major companies who really started building e-commerce on a large scale. And then Alibaba also acquired, for example, Daraz. So we're now actually part of the largest e-commerce company of the world, which is Alibaba from China. And if you really look at what has happened in the last 10 years, I would say, it has really been booming. And so it's really a very strong growth. And I would also say that, especially now with COVID, this growth has even been more accelerated. So even before COVID, we were thinking about like a global e-commerce growth of, let's say, 20% on a global, which is huge for an industry. Now, when we talk about COVID, this is even going faster. And obviously in Nepal, it's still a bit of a new concept, so it's still in the early stages, I would say, since 3-4 years, I would say. But then also really the growth has been really, really strong here. And obviously now, when we look at Nepal, it's also booming. And again, COVID is one of the factors why it is booming.
So, Mr. Pyakurel, how do you assess the current situation of e-commerce and online marketplaces in Nepal?
Regarding the situation right now, if you look at it, I mean it's still at its infancy stage when you look at Nepal in context. Obviously, if you compare to the parts of the West or even major markets in China, India, right, you've seen how the industry has been booming significantly, exponentially over the course of years. But then I think certain things, certain challenges, being as one of the major, let's say, players in the industry, comes with certain restrictions. That's something, let's say, policymakers are not yet have not yet established in terms of, or they're not kind of addressed this in terms of current economies, and also considering how we're working towards getting everyone on board and making sure everyone is making particularly with SMEs, they're kind of working towards making more business out of this. So this is something we see that customers don't understand, or let's say even vendors, the whole ecosystem, players in the ecosystem don't really understand, let's say, the complexity of business. So being bigger in scale also comes with a lot of challenges, and so I think that's where it'll take certain time for everyone to understand the complexity and then have the expectations accordingly. So I think right now, we're growing, definitely, but then again, education from customer and education from seller side is really one of our major focuses in the upcoming months and years.
How the policymakers and stakeholders are trying to solve these complexities and to simplify them. Are there any actions being taken?
Yeah, so I mean, we do see a lot of positive signs, right? I think if you look back in time, let's say particularly a year ago, or let's say 2 years ago, so there were not a lot of other, if you look at particularly pure marketplace businesses when it comes to other industry, not only just e-commerce, they were not existent, right? But then now, if you look at it, there's a lot of initiatives also from government itself. They're working on making policies, ensuring that customers are protected, sellers are protected, and this is something that is at our core. Having said that, making sure even government understand the processes, understand the business model, and we want to be there trying to showcase like how the business model works, how everyone is protected with our current policy, and letting them know and making sure this is all addressed is also something we've seen a lot positively from governments, from other policymakers. So I think right now it's really going in a good direction, and I think if you look at any markets right across the world, so businesses come and then there's policy made, and it is a positive sign. It's not something that we take it in a wrong way. But then, having said that, I think that's a very good, strong sign, particularly after the COVID. This has also drawn a lot of attention from policymakers and government authorities, so which is really a good thing. That's how I see it.
And how do you see the growth of the said platform and mushrooming of loads of e-commerce websites during the lockdown in Nepal, and how exactly is it serving the nation?
So I think let me start with lockdown actually there, right? So I think going back, when you look at how we went into lockdown all of a sudden in one over the night. So what really happened was, government took a lot of strict measures to make sure everyone is staying at home with a full country lockdown, and this is where we kind of partnered with Big Mart, right? And that's where, in terms of how we could facilitate customers to make sure they still are able to shop online and they're still able to get their daily groceries, at their doorstep, making sure we have hygienes in place from core staff at operations or at head office, So this is something where we saw that, okay, the business were definitely booming. There were a lot of other players coming into the mix, which is also something that we take it in a positive way, because then there is a lot of, let's say, scrutiny in the industry. But then again, having said that, back to my earlier point that, we being at a different scale does come with different challenges. And, so this is somewhere, customers, we really work hard to ensure customers are educated, they really see, we really provide them the service that we promise for, right? So in that sense, it has really grown. The grocery has significantly grown. If you look at particularly for grocery, it's grown by 900%, since the lockdown. So we do see a lot of changes in behavior from a consumer perspective, particularly with the grocery section, which is already always a bigger challenge if you look at the category or if you look at the industry itself. So in that sense, it has definitely helped a lot as a business, and particularly for other smaller players as well, to kind of enter into the market. So in that sense, yes, so far it's been really good.
Since e-commerce is still a relatively new phenomenon in Nepal, right? So, and normal citizens are still not quite sure about utilizing this platform to its fullest potential. So what are you working on to ease the situation in Nepal, especially?
You're right that e-commerce is still in an early stage, but then also it's not as small as people sometimes think, right? So I would say really, especially in the last 2-3 years, it has been really, really picking up very, very strong. The first e-commerce company started actually already in 2011 here, but then really in the last 2 to 3 years, also especially since Alibaba came into the country, it really started booming. But obviously there's still a lot of improvement and for growth really necessary. But then when we look at our registered users on Dharaz, we have more than 1.5 million registered users on Dharaz. That's like 5% of the entire Nepali population. So when you think about it from a scale perspective, it's actually quite large already. But obviously there's still a lot of room for more. So we can really still grow more, and we can reach more people. We can reach different age groups than we usually do right now. And in the beginning, and this is the same like for Facebook or any other technology, it's usually with the young people, let's say 16 to 35, who start with this concept. But then afterwards also we saw now very recent traction in the last 2 years, I would say from, let's say, 35 plus, from a lot of housewives and a lot of seniors, a lot of corporates who now do their sales pretty much and get it delivered to their doorstep, or get the groceries delivered to their home. So there's a really positive traction. But then in the end, it's all about trust. And I would say, especially in the beginning, to really get this chance to first really try it in the first time, you need to have this trust. And how we really focus on getting trust is two things. It's on the one hand, really focusing on education, right? This is one of the major parts that we really need to keep explaining what we're actually doing. What is e-commerce actually, and what is a marketplace, and what is an online retailer? Because in the end, Dharaz, we don't hold any own inventory. We're not buying and selling product, but we're actually just facilitating the sale between thousands of sellers and hundreds of thousands of buyers every day. So it's really this connection. And obviously we need to make sure that there's policies and structures in place, like Temple mentioned, so that they have a good experience. So education is the first part, and also explaining that there's a returns policy, so if they have a product that is different than advertised, then they should be able to return it. But we did last year, we did a couple of million orders in one single year, and only a tiny percentage usually gets returned. But that does happen, and that's also something we need to improve. So that's the first part, education. And the second part is all about customer experience. And when we talk about customer experience, what we mean is having a wide assortment, so really making sure that it's the latest products, the latest phones, the latest fashion brands is really what Temple and the team are focusing on, that we have this live. That's super, super important. And then obviously also we need to ensure that there's a lot of convenience, right? So that people get it delivered to their doorstep and they get it delivered fast. So kind of these two factors together in the end make a good purchase experience. So it's really about this. And in the end, it's all about an incentive, and really we need to get people try it out for the first time, like they tried out Facebook for the first time, they're trying out reading the news online for the first time. And then usually these incentives comes with, for example, major campaigns that we're running. So we're running, for example, actually today is the first day of our Budget Bazaar campaign, which where people can get really a lot of discounts, and they can actually try it out and get a deal that they would nowhere get in the country. And then really once this incentive happened, then we need to perform very strong together with the sellers and the logistics partners. And then in the end, people will come back, and that's also what we see.
Talking about what kind of customer feedback do you usually get after you complete a transaction with a client, a customer, or something like that?
I mean, we would, considering what I mentioned, so we did a few million orders last year, right? So that also shows that we're not doing it so badly, right? So I think generally, I think there's a lot of traction, a lot of people are adopting to e-commerce. But then, like I also said, like there's obviously still a fraction where things might go wrong. And this is where we then very closely listen. We have a very big customer service team with more than 60 people. We will really get these insights and understand what went actually wrong. Because also we're not perfect. We never say that we're perfect. I think we're doing a lot of things right, but also so some things we're still doing wrong, and we need to improve them. And we need to get the feedback through our delivery riders, through our customer service team, and then kind of see how can we convert these insights into better actions, being stricter on logistics partners, being stricter on sellers, that they perform well and they deliver the right product, but also being strict on us, right? So it's not really, we can't just shift the blame away. It's really about the whole ecosystem that everyone needs to improve, and we're not there yet. And even a country like India is not done yet, but we're on a good track.
So how satisfied are you from the current performance of Dharaz in Nepal?
Very, very much. I mean, it's great fun working in Nepal. I mean, obviously coming from a very different culture, working in a very different working environment here is just very rewarding, right? It's still in the early stage. There's still a lot of things that have to be fixed. But then we have a very young team, really ambitious team, and they want to change the country for the better. And I really mean it. It's really that we often don't take no for an answer, and we don't always do what we have been doing in the past, but we're trying out so many different things, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But generally, it's going really well. And also when we look at where the company stands right now, is we have been growing more than 220% year on year in terms of our order volume together with all the sellers, right? It's not us selling, but then all the sellers together. So it's really going in the right direction, and it makes me optimistic actually about the future of Nepal, because the young people they're working hard, and and so we're going really in the right direction.
So can you tell me about the recent scheme Dharaz has introduced, Mr. Pyakurel?
Yes, so I think like earlier we mentioned basically, so like Lino mentioned earlier in terms of, how the big pool of seller base, and bringing them more customers into the platform, bringing more sellers into the platform is really the fundamental success of an e-commerce, fundamental success of, how we can boom the economy in that sense. So keeping this in mind, this is something, where we launched a program called Sahyatri, where this was really targeted on SME sellers, and this is also from a lot of experience being part of Alibaba, from previous experiences, how we could, in this time when everyone's suffering from a lot of cash flow issues, when it comes to sales issues, how we could do to support community during this time, right? And this is where we came up with the program like Sahyatri, where there were weekly payouts instead of two times a month payout. There were 0% listing fee, where we did not charge any fees to our sellers, and this was a very big pool of sellers, and this was very successful, right? We almost had about 5,000 sign-ups during this whole time, where sellers really wanted to come on platform. They really want to kind of see how they can do online shopping. They can really serve customers online with thousands of customers coming on our platform, and we've seen this really a big influx of sellers. Now, having said that, like Lino mentioned earlier, that making sure these sellers provide service is again another crucial challenge for us. Making sure that they're giving the right products, they're dispatching goods on time, and that again comes with a big challenge for us to ensure that the whole funneling of sellers that's coming in, we kind of provide the right training and the right infrastructure is set up so that we can provide good service to our customers in the end. So in that sense, this program has really been helpful, and I think we could come up with different forms in the future, considering that there has been a lot of interest from sellers, and there's And the underlying principle of this is really that, it's these small, medium enterprises that actually, brings up the nation's economy, right? So I'm not sure with the numbers, but then generally, it's about 40% of the economy really comes from the SME sellers, so 40 to 60%, I believe. And I think that's where we really want to support. You could be a small seller with a 50 square foot room, having few hundred assortments, to a bigger brands, having a lot of assortment, and you could really get access to all these customers that we bring on the platform. So in that sense, this has really been successful, and we kind of really want to make sure that we keep promises to the commitment that we make to our customers with all these influx.
And maybe to add to this, I think to also give a bit of a perspective, we had 5,000 sellers actually on our platform before COVID, and then, like Temple explained, 5,000 signed up more, right? So really we doubled our seller base in just a matter of just a few weeks, and or even a few months, and people now really realize that there's a lot of other chances to sell, right? Because often you also know that a lot of shops were closed for a long time. Footfalls in the stores is still very low, right? Even though now, after the lockdown, people still often don't want to go out of their house because they're still scared of the consequence, and that's also understandable. So people are really adopting a lot more to e-commerce now because they want to stay safe, and that's also obviously impacting the offline stores. And in that sense, we really want to give these small shops the platform not to only sell really, let's say, within Kathmandu, but also sell nationwide. And then also looking at it from a next year perspective, maybe not only nationwide, but actually selling in the ecosystem of Alibaba. So selling into other countries like Bangladesh or to China or to Southeast Asia. So these are things that we're looking at to really not open Nepal for the sellers, but really open actually Asia. And that's also something that we're very excited about.
So how do you think this e-commerce can support people during this COVID pandemic and ensuring access to products while enabling social distancing?
So I think the first really important thing is safety, right? And we consider safety as one of our major pinnacle of working principles at work. And this comes down all to our delivery rider heroes, that go deliver to our customers at the front line, and then we have a big team of people working at our offices. So I think more on that in terms of, could share more details in terms of, how the whole company we've structured in terms of team A and B across the verticals. But then I think that's one major important, that we are safe, all the employees within Dharaz, all the teams within Dharaz are safe to ensure that we serve our customers safer, right? And that's one of the major, let's say, principles and values that we have at our core at this point. The next thing would be, we consider our platform, so having said, like Lino mentioned earlier, that we have brands from fashion to electronics, making sure we offer wider range of portfolio from 300,000 to 400,000 of products on the platform. What we want to achieve is one shopping destination, right? So when it comes to, you come on the platform and you have pretty much access to groceries, fashion, top-ups, or any kind of other products that you could find in the market. So this is our ultimate solution that we want to provide to customers with delivery at the doorsteps, right? So you have card payments, you don't have to do cash transactions. We have all the protocols in place where customers are, we consider social distancing to really, at our core, making sure, customers feel safe at their, doorstep when we deliver. But then, yes, I think so far, we really made sure that we kind of follow these protocols.
You mentioned earlier, Daraz was providing logistics during the course of lockdown. And how were you operating and providing your services despite the restrictions?
I mean, as you can imagine, logistics in Nepal is never easy, right? Because you obviously have a very challenging environment, which makes it difficult even in normal days, I would say. So in lockdown, we obviously had to focus only on groceries, like Temple also explained. So we had to focus because we were always complying with the government regulations and we were fully supportive. So that also meant that in lockdown, we could only deliver within Kathmandu with our own delivery fleet, which is called Daraz Express. So that was our major focus. So we didn't really work with other logistics companies that we usually work with. But then usually in non-lockdown times, we deliver to more than 30 cities. And this is where we really work with, on the one hand, with Daraz Express, but then also on the other hand, with a lot of different logistics parties, like these courier companies that you also might know. So in lockdown, obviously, it was a bit more difficult, and also happened that We had a very close dialogue with the government. We were in touch with them pretty much on a weekly basis. And there was definitely a little bit of a disconnect sometimes when it comes to what happened on ground and what was eventually enforced from government side. But then in the end, the government was very supportive. And they also understood that e-commerce can fill a need in this hour. And that was the good benefit for us. It was not really only about Daraz, but actually was all the e-commerce businesses together. We really formed this alliance, actually, this e-commerce association, where we really lobbied together and really had very good constructive discussions on what has to be done right now. So, and in the beginning it was only four-wheelers, for example, allowed. At some point bikes were also allowed again. But this was always really like a back and forth. And in the end, it was always to ensure that people can still get all the items that they need, groceries, essentials, but they don't have to leave the house. So actually it was very good. And then after lockdown, we now really went back to normal, right? So we're now delivering to 30 cities nationwide. We're working with multiple logistics companies together to really ensure that this logistics infrastructure is backed up again. So it's really going in the right direction now again.
Then how are you working on ensuring employment hygiene and safety during the course of the ongoing global pandemic?
Yeah, good question. I think Temple mentioned it a little bit. So like our major priority, and sometimes people think like, okay, they're very strict about it, but the first objective is really that we need to make sure that our team feels safe. Because if our team cannot feel safe, our customers cannot feel safe. I think we had the very fortunate experience that we had a lot of learnings from Alibaba in China, you know, where the outbreak was the first, and also with our Southeast Asian sister companies, because we're also active in Southeast Asia, just under different names. So we could also really take all these learnings into account. And that really helped us. So we really could take these learnings into account. And we always had to ensure that we follow a plan. And the first plan was always about hygiene, right? Really about education. What is COVID actually all about? So we actually invited health scientists, for example, to our office. We explained what is COVID-19 and what are the consequences and what can we do to be safe on the one hand. But then on the other hand, we also then really enforced hygiene rules, for example, making sure that everyone wears masks and gloves on the delivery side, that social distancing is followed the entire time, that we really reduce the occupancy of our different offices. So really make sure that it's not too crowded. So these were a couple of things that we did. We really have a 7-stage plan that we follow, and people have to really strictly follow it. There's no exceptions, nothing. Because in the end, if we don't follow it, then our customers cannot feel safe. So it was always a major priority for us. And it is still up to this day.
So what were the major challenges during implementation of your whole, you know?
I think maybe a challenge would be, I think generally people took it quite positively, right? They also know that it's in the best interest for everyone to follow these rules, because you know, they want to stay safe themselves, and they also want to stay safe or ensure the safety of their family. So people have been following quite well, but obviously it still requires, you know, a lot of training, ongoing training, really educating, especially also young people who are delivering. But then everyone now understood it, and that's the major part, that it's just an ongoing process. You can't just implement hygiene rules and you can just say, okay, wear a mask, take the sanitizer, stick to the social distancing, and then you expect that everything works. It's really an ongoing process, and we will also continue to do it over the next months to really ensure that people will feel safe, and taking all these learnings from Alibaba in China and from other countries into account, that social distancing can be followed throughout the next months, but people can still shop safely. Yeah.
What are the ways for the e-commerce and online marketplaces to boost the country's economy, Mr. Pyakurel?
So, you know, if you really look at other countries and, you know, across even India, China, you know, it's really like how we kind of bring all the sellers and everyone together in terms of the mix, right? Making sure we here are, you know, trying to make sure that we establish the ecosystem, and it's not easy, right? Being in a bigger in scale, existing in this market, making sure, you know, we have card payments there, making sure we have sellers, making sure we have logistics partners. So we have a lot of challenges in different processes during, you know, if you look at our end-to-end from process perspective, so we do have a lot of challenges. So what we would like to kind of achieve in the end is making sure, you know, we have a lot of ecosystem tied up, and having this in place will then give business to more people. You know, they get more, they can sellers can act as an entrepreneurs, but then having said that, at the same time, other businesses in the ecosystem actually grow as we grow bigger. And this is one of the major kind of being at the infancy stage is one of our major priorities that we actually we really work closely with all our partners and in a collaborative manner that they also grow as we grow, and they see that okay, there's a long-term vested relationship being partnered with Daraz, and they can see their business going forward, and we can see ours. So this is something that we want to ensure that okay, we bring more sellers in, we bring more customers in, and then we provide a big pool of customer base. Like Lino mentioned, right now we have about 5%, but then we really want to achieve really high, close towards 30% in the next few years. And once we have that, I think then pretty much businesses will remain very kind of aggressive, and they will see how they've made an impact in the society, in the community, and they've kind of been able to be at home and then make a business and a living in their own. So that's something how we see where this is going to go in the future.
And maybe also just to add on this, I think it's very important what Temple mentioned is we don't only want to build Daraz, right? We also want to build this ecosystem, because if the ecosystem becomes bigger, it's also again good for us. So it's working in that way. So that means obviously, like Temple said, we need to focus on making sellers really significantly better every day, right? So having very strict policies and constant education and training. We, for example, launched at Daraz University, which is an online tool where we really took the best practices from China and really giving it to sellers for free here now. So this is really the one part, making logistics partners really significantly better, giving the benchmark to them that they eventually become better. So, and this also means for us, obviously, a lot of investment, right? So the Psychiatry program is one part which also was a significant investment for us. But then also when it comes to logistics, there's still a lot of room for improvement on our side, but also really in the whole ecosystem. And that's why we're also really going to invest a couple of $1 million in the next months to really ensure that customers can actually get their item, and they can get it faster, and they can also get it now in more remote areas going forward. So there's always room for improvement, but I think really the direction that we're taking is the right one, because we have the right mindset. And it will not be easy, we will do mistakes, but in the end, it's at the best benefit for the whole economy. And I think that's also really important to highlight that we're not done yet, there's still a lot of room for growth, but we're pretty optimistic about the future here.
So also talking about the ecosystem, you just talked about ecosystem and alliances with other e-commerce sites also. So how is the alliance actually working on to smoothen the difficulties of the transition to the online marketplace from the...
It's a very good question. And I think generally, and also there was positive in lockdown that while maybe before lockdown, some of the smaller the smaller e-commerce companies and us, we haven't really talked much because everyone was focused on themselves and really building it big. But then even with the smaller ones, and we have to say that, there's Daraz, but then they're just very small players here, right? And it's mostly about Daraz. But then still, it was still very good discussing with all the other e-commerce companies, because in the end, it cannot be one company defining a policy together with the government. It needs to be all the stakeholders, and it needs to be at Food Mandu, right? It needs to be really multiple businesses that are in the ecosystem space, a patao, it can be really from different angles. And everyone was really getting together, even though sometimes, it was competition, but in the end, it's in the best interest for everyone to build a good policy. And this is where actually it was quite positive to see that everyone came together, talked to the government, and really achieve something together. And I hope also that stays, that we're not now going out and not really talking to each other anymore. I think when it comes to policy, then it's really good that we collaborate. And then in the end, if everyone grows, if our competitors grow, it's also good for us, because then it becomes a service battle. And if our competitors are really bad, then yes, for example, we will probably have more customers, but then also the trust that I mentioned in the beginning towards e-commerce is kind of decreased a little bit. So we would also love that they do more and they do better and they grow, because in the end it's good for the ecosystem.
It was a pleasure to have you here, gentlemen, and I think we're almost at the end of our program. Keep watching AP1.